Okay, so hello, good morning everyone. My name is Guillermo Figueruelo. I'm Business Development Manager at Aragon Hydrogen Foundation. As you can see, we are here in the session, in the parallel session on green hydrogen, sustainable energy, and we are going to hold this session in English because we have a speaker connected online, Janice Lin, and I think if we are on the right moment to connect with her, we will start the session. Okay, yeah, so we have Janice there. So Janice is a Bachelor of Science in Economics from the Wharton School with a Bachelor of Arts in International Relations from the University of Pennsylvania and an MBA from Stanford University. She left industry in 1999 to pursue a career in clean energy and work in solar industry. After that, she founded Strategen, a global connected impact-driven professional services firm on mission to decarbonize energy systems. She's also the founder and president of the Green Hydrogen Coalition. Janice has over 25 years of strategy experience and has distinguished herself as a leading clean energy change-maker and visionary. Janice co-founded for a decade served as executive director of the California Energy Storage Alliance, where she helped create the world's most robust energy storage market. Janice is an internationally recognized thought leader in energy storage and grid decarbonization and won the 2019 Clean Award for Entrepreneur of the Year. In 2019 also, Janice launched the Green Hydrogen Coalition, an educational non-profit dedicated to facilitating policies and practices to advance the production and use of green hydrogen in all sectors where it will accelerate the transition to a carbon-free energy system. Okay, impressive CV, Janice. Welcome here in Bilbao and very early and very good morning in the early mornings because I think that you are connected from California, so thank you very much for attending us in such hours. I would like to break the ice in this parallel session with an individual question to all the speakers. I will present them each one by one. So Janice, 2020 has been a year in which hydrogen strategies were released and also at national levels. Do you think this is the hydrogen momentum and also related, obviously, to mobility? The floor is yours, Janice.
Thank you, and thanks for that kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. I wish I could be there in person. My answer to your question is absolutely. And I'll tell you a short story. I first became aware of hydrogen in 2009. A professor from Fraunhofer was visiting me in California and shared a vision for how renewable hydrogen would be made from wind and solar and start to displace natural gas in the gas system and displace fossil fuels in so many applications. He called it Power to X. I thought it was about the craziest thing I'd ever heard. Truly, this was in 2009. Well, I think everything that professor talked about is now possible. It's coming true, and it's happening very, very quickly. And I look forward to sharing more about what we're doing to accelerate its momentum.
So yeah, I think that we all agree about the momentum, but let's see also how Joanna see this momentum. So Joanna Richard is head of hydrogen business at Ricardo PLC. Joanna is an engineer master at mechanical engineering from the SEC Technical University in Prague and chartered engineer from the Institute of Mechanical Engineers with an MBA at Birmingham Business School. During the last 10 years, approximately, she has been business development director, both in Torotrack and Intelligent Energy, and half a year ago, she joined Ricardo as head of hydrogen business. What do you think about this hydrogen momentum, and how do you have experienced this momentum during the last half year, Joanna?
Okay, thanks, Guillermo, first of all, for the direction. And thanks to everyone for coming to the morning session to listen what's happening about the hydrogen. I think this question is a little bit sentimental for me as well, because I go similar as Yanis, quite far, far, far back. And I remember the conversations back where H2 mobility started to be created. So funny enough, you mentioned a person from Germany. So it was a German H2 mobility that started kind of the movement in Europe. And that's when you look at sort of around Europe and around the world, you have H2 mobility US, H2 mobility France, H2 mobility UK, but the German one was called H2 mobility. It wasn't H2 mobility Germany because they were the first, and at the time nobody knew whether there will be others. So when you look at, is there now a momentum? You know, I remember having that conversation in 2015 with some of the colleagues, and we were all like, oh, this is now really happening. It's the breaking year now. We really believe in it because we now have all these H2 mobilities and governments are starting to take notice. And, you know, yet again, we are in 2021 still asking the same question. So I think, you know, yes, hydrogen will happen, but I believed this 10 years ago. I believed this in 2015. And it's just we have different challenges. I think back in those days, we were meeting people who were still living the Hildeberg. Yeah, whenever somebody says hydrogen, they came up with this, oh my God, it's going to explode, and what else can it be used for? You know, so we had to do all the story and explaining them hydrogen is an energy carrier, and it was such a big task just to bring people along on that journey. And these days, I think the challenge is very different. It's no longer about, oh, is hydrogen safe? I think people understand how to deal with the hydrogen to make it safe. But now everybody is in that mind, I want it as cheap as normal fuel, and I want it now, and why is it not happening around the whole world in large scale? And it's more about having that collaboration. And people also no longer look just like, explain me how it works. They are now looking at different production methods and looking, okay, how much carbon do I produce in which? It's not just make it happen, it's how much CO2 I create in every process. So it's becoming a lot more complex because so many people believe in it, so many people lobbying. So it definitely will happen. But which year is the break year? I still don't know. I hope I will not be here in 10 years' time still being asked, is now the year?
Yeah, it rings the bell to me what you told about the momentum history in 2015. I visited as a child with the school around Hydrogen Foundation in 2008, so like 13 years ago, and I have been told there by my colleagues now that that was the hydrogen momentum, but it was clearly not. It was clearly not. Okay, yeah. So the next speaker is Telmo Chavarri. He is hydrogen investment manager at Cener Renewable Investments. So Telmo is Master of Science Engineer from the Universidad de Navarra with an executive MBA in Business Administration from the IESE Business School, also at the Universidad of Navarra. And just to tell you a bit of Cener, but I guess that you almost know them. So Cener, with a long experience in renewables and hydrogen mobility, has made a strong commitment to be traction company in the hydrogen market, developing new technology solutions in the field of electrolyzers and developing new solutions for integrating renewables with hydrogen production and end uses. So Telmo, how do you see the momentum of hydrogen also in Cener, that we are very used to see Cener in the news right now?
Yes. Hello everybody, thank you very much for the introduction, Guillermo. I think we see that during this especially year and a half, from the government and from local authorities, even big companies, they have everybody made commitments of carbon reduction, emissions, and to decarbonize, fully decarbonize the economy. And we have get to the point that we realize that there are sectors and there are places where electrification and other sorts of decarbonization methods cannot reach. And it's the moment when hydrogen and using a fuel and a so versatile and valuable molecule as hydrogen that can be turned into electricity, into more complex organic compounds, can help us to reach all these objectives and to really decarbonize and enter into a more sustainable economy sector. Okay. Also, we are seeing that in mobility, battery electric vehicles, they are starting to get into a market, but there is still a big bunch of other sort of transportations that batteries are not economic enough, the electrification cannot accomplish their economic objectives, and that's, I think, where hydrogen has the place and can totally do it.
I think that what we have seen during the last years in terms of mobility in hydrogen is that the hydrogen sector is finding its niche market in long-haul distances. So yeah, we can align on that. And finally, the last speaker we have today is Tomás Malango. He's hydrogen director at Repsol. So Tomás is a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering from the Universidad Complutense de Madrid with postgraduate education in Advanced Management from IE Business School and Management of Research, Development and Technology Transfer from IESE Business School. He joined Repsol in 2001 at the Portollano refinery, where he was operation head in different areas before joining the Repsol Technology Center as Senior Refining Technologist in 2008. Since then, all of your professional life almost, Tomás has managed different technology development projects at Repsol Technology Lab. Since 2021, so this year, he became a hydrogen director and responsible of the development for Repsol in the hydrogen business along the value chain. How do you see in Repsol the momentum of the hydrogen right now?
Thank you very much, Guillermo. Egunon, buenos días a todos. First of all, I would like to thank the organization of SunBio and my colleagues here from Petronor for inviting me to attend the session. Yes, and I agree with all my colleagues have said previously. Probably something that people don't know, that the first hydrogen refueling station of Spain was installed by Repsol in 2007 in the bus the bus from the city of Madrid. So we also thought at that moment that was the hydrogen momentum, and then we drove back and we dismantled that refueling station 1.5 years ago. Repsol has been very focused on providing energy for the society, and Petronor locally also, and we also have been aware about the impact on the environment of the energy providing, which is a challenge. You know? The demand of energy is growing, and at the same time, we need to decrease the environment impact. At that point, hydrogen has been always a kind of promise, and I think that you are right, because this is the momentum. The momentum is very becoming from the point of availability of renewable energy. I think that's enabling the real possibility to become, let's say, a well-installed vector, because the problem of production hydrogen is the amount of energy that you need. So it's a kind of trade-off, and you need renewable energy sufficient to create this hydrogen momentum. We are very involved in that, and we really believe in that, and that's the reason why, after establishing our strategic goals in 2015, we want to produce 552 megawatts of hydrogen and 1.9 gigawatts by 2030. So we are doing a big bet, and according to this, we have created the unit that is going to perform the projects, and we can talk about that later on. Indeed, some of my colleagues leading projects are here in the room, so it will be fine to go deeper in that. So we really believe that there's the opportunity to do that. We really believe that Spain has a good position to create a hydrogen momentum locally, not despite of the world global movement that we think is going to happen, but we think Spain has a good position, and Repsol, as energy provider of the Spanish society, we want to be leading this movement.
Thank you very much, Tomás. I think that you tackle a key point. This is the availability of the renewable sources, because obviously here we are interested in talking about the green hydrogen. We are trying to avoid another color such as blue hydrogen or green hydrogen. So after this first round of questions, I would like to know a little bit more about the strategy agenda in all of your entities. So Yanis, we are coming back to you to know how does Strategian work on sustainable mobility, and how do you include hydrogen in your strategy agenda? Yanis.
Thank you. So we're a global consulting firm operating mostly in North America and Australia. And as mentioned in my intro, we're very focused on how to accelerate a clean energy transition. In addition to starting a nonprofit focused on advancing energy storage for the grid, we've also started another nonprofit called the Vehicle Grid Integration Council, which advances sustainable mobility primarily through battery electrics. And by discovering, the focus of that nonprofit is by discovering and monetizing the value of smart EV charging. And the reason we focused on hydrogen is for the reasons my panel colleagues mentioned before, is that hydrogen not only can address mobility, and especially some of these very hard to abate applications, long-haul trucking, shipping, even aviation, but it has a really profound impact in decarbonizing so many other sectors. And so I think the final thing I wanted to say is our focus through the Green Hydrogen Coalition and our other work is how do we accelerate this? And really the key is about how to accelerate both production and demand at scale. And I look forward to talking about that in a little bit.
Yeah. Joanna, we know that Ricardo touches several issues in the hydrogen value chain, but how do you introduce the hydrogen in your strategy agenda during the last year or some years ago?
That's actually a very good question. So I clearly only got my job a couple of months ago. So that's because the company kind of started seeing hydrogen as something very, very important, which we need to promote a lot more. So we used to do a lot internally, but it wasn't very coordinated. So as you know, Ricardo is a big company, so we have about 3,000 people around the world across different divisions, from energy sector, policy advisors, strategic planning, and all the way to the engineering and emergency response. So it's a very, very broad spectrum of people. But we are also technology agnostic. So much I love hydrogen myself, and I would like the hydrogen to be the answer for everything on the planet. Ricardo as a company is independent. So if a client comes and says, look, how do I decarbonize my fleet? And they happen to be in the country where actually it would be very difficult to get the hydrogen, we don't give them the advice, go for hydrogen. We genuinely assess the location, the applications, look at the whole cost model and kind of what are the natural resources in that country, what are they going to achieve by decarbonization, and what would be the best path for them. So same in the engineering division. So we work for people who bring gas engines to us, and LPG, CNG, we work on all of those. So yes, while I am hydrogen, and it's one of the key pillars for the company, it's not the answer to everything. So we also do digitalization as our key strategy, electrification, and tools. So hydrogen is one of the 4 pillars of the company, but we try to remain technology neutral, and therefore we can always provide the right answer for our clients.
Yeah, I think that the last point that you mentioned will open the debate for the next round. The issues of electrification and digitalization on not only hydrogen but also these both issues. Next one, Telmo, we have seen, as I've mentioned before, Sener in the news during the last months. We are all eager to know about the strategy agenda of your entity in terms of hydrogen and in terms of hydrogen mobility.
Thank you. Yes, as you've seen, we have been quite present on the news recently. Our strategy and the strategy of Sener in terms of hydrogen and hydrogen technology, we see it. As you know, last year, the Spanish Minister for Ecological Transition published the Spanish roadmap for hydrogen, and it was quite a structured roadmap in which they focus first up to 2025 pretty much on substituting current hydrogen, grey hydrogen production means by green hydrogen, then afterwards when they expect other future uses to start being competitive, such as mobility, such as fuel, such as many other different uses. So our intention is pretty much to focus on that. First of all, to have a fast deployment and to produce electrolyzers to cope with this first wave, okay, of projects and to substitute the great uses of hydrogen and to be able to do this fast with competitive technology. And in the meantime, to develop new technology for the future uses that will start to be competitive from the year 2025. I mean, we don't think we will start seeing those big deployments on new uses until year 2025, but if we wanted them to be competitive, we have to start working on them right now. Okay, if not, we will reach to the year 2025, we will have done nothing, nobody will be competitive, and the hydrogen will not enter the market. So we have to start now, and our intention is to start thinking on the future uses and how we will produce the hydrogen for the mobility and for those new things for the future uses of hydrogen.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Telmo. We all know also, well, at least, Thomas, I didn't remember that the hydrogen filling station in 2007 you mentioned was from Repsol, but I knew that the first two mobility hydrogen cases in Spain were abandoned after the funding from the European Commission was stopped. This is not happening right now. We are all implementing and developing collaborative European projects, and we are creating new joint ventures, startups, and business cases from the projects that we are developing inside of the hydrogen sector. So that was very important, and thank you for remembering that before. How do Repsol introduces hydrogen in their agenda? I think that from several years ago, and how do you see the tendency of the market in the next years in your entity?
Okay, we explained that a couple of days ago. We have the low carbon day, and then we launched our strategy. We update our ambitions on low carbon, let's say, energy. Very focused on renewable generation, hydrogen, and circularity, which are the three pillars that we are working on, despite of our continuous working on energy efficiency that we're still doing in our sites. And regarding hydrogen, our strategy is very focused on, let's say, creating a role of backbone of this new market in Spain. As Janice has mentioned, to develop the market, you need the production capabilities and the consumption and the demand on the other side. Fortunately for us, we have both capacities. Indeed, we are the main producers and consumers of hydrogen in the Iberian Peninsula right now. Mm-hmm. So we're going to leverage our capacity based on that. So that will be the starting point for sure, trying to create industrial capacity and introduce this consumption. We know, as Telmo has mentioned also, that there's a funding gap and we have to work on that. Together with the public regulators and diluting with also other companies, as you mentioned, also in G-Base. But our strategy is to roadmap on that. The first, and then, as I mentioned, the first early approach will be to our self-demand, and after that we'll move downwards to other sectors. Taking also tell more words on that. I think that the decarbonization of the transport sector, especially because industry is probably direct hydrogen will work very good, but if you're talking about transport sector, which is one of the hard-to-abate sectors, hydrogen carriers, I guess, which are molecules going to be produced with the hydrogen, will be the next step that we have to move forward. At that point, we are doing some demo plant here of e-fuels. I think that we need to develop a little bit more some technologies and demonstrate and scale up a lot of them, including hydrogen production. So I would say that the first step of our first pillar is the industrial capacity. The second one is the technology development, and we need to develop some technologies. Let's say that, to be honest, electrolyzer technology is not a mature industry right now. So we are pushing very hard. The biggest electrolyzer is 20 megawatts, I guess, and we're trying to ask for 100 at least. And then this is the first wave. So if we want to go to full hydrogen, we will talk about 500 megawatts. Who knows? And that's a huge increase of capacity in a very short time. So we need to work a lot in technology to assure that we can achieve the goals that the ambition that we have ahead. And finally, I think that there are some other things that are more soft skills regarding the dissemination of the knowledge against people. We have to create a new working force regarding this hydrogen economy. We need also to create the regulation and the correct environment to let the market grow up. And finally, at that point also, we need to create some collaboration between the public and private sector, or this kind of collaboration agreements, JVs, SPVs, and so on. So there is 3 main targets. Industrial, we're going to do hydrogen for sure, and I have already said the figures. We are quite huge. We're talking about almost $1 billion of euros that we're going to put on our strategy from now to 2025. If we need technology development, it's very important. We need to push and to found a lot of projects of the technology development, because if we don't, we will not achieve the goals in the second wave. And finally, we need to insert this value chain in the society and create value in different areas.
Mm-hmm. But very wide scope, I can see from Repsol. And just to mention one of your comments, the Green Deal call of 100 megawatt electrolyzer has just been evaluated. So there is 100 megawatt electrolyzer that is going to be located in the refinery of Cell in Germany, and the other one is in Denmark. I don't know if you know more details about the Danish one. I don't know personally.
Well, as far as I know, they have been awarded 3 projects, despite of these 2 what you mentioned, 100, and the third is in Portugal.
Uh-huh.
So finally, because they awarded the 3, and I know because our project was the 4th, so we just not been awarded, but we know that there are other 3 are being awarded. But in any case, we're going to execute the project. I think that the most important thing is that, and that's what shows that we are committed with the hydrogen momentum, is that we are going to execute the project no matter we have not been awarded a Green Deal. And there's also a 100 megawatt project that is going to be performed here in Bilbao. Yeah. And we're going to push, and we're going to do also other projects in Tarragona, another one in Cartagena, and all of them will be above 100 megawatts. So I think, yes, the Green Deal is important, but it's not the only instrument. We need to keep talking with the public authorities in order to purchase this, to get this funding or this help or this, let's say, collaboration, share of risk. You can say, mention it as you want. But the important thing is the commitment. I think that the difference between this momentum and another one is the commitment, and I think that, and I hope that not only Repsol, but Repsol for sure, we are clear on that, and we are going to push it anyway.
Okay, thank you. So we continue on the debate, and here at this moment I would like to open the debate to the 4th of you. Maybe we should start with Denise, that is connected online, and it would be maybe a little bit difficult to exchange comments with her. So, and I would like to open the debate with maybe controversial issue here. The debate in between when to use electric battery cars and fuel cell vehicles. Do they have enough space in our roads? How do you see the fight Between them, let me maybe say my impression that we think that in the last years, I think I have expressed a little bit before, we are finding the right niche market for each of us. So urban mobility, passenger mobility for electric battery vehicles, and long-haul distances for freight transport and maybe also passengers for these fuel cell electric vehicles. We should also not forget about other types of mobility, such as train, ships, and so on and so forth. So Yanis, what's your vision on that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I don't like to characterize this as a fight as battery electric versus hydrogen fuel cells. I think we need both, and they serve different uses. It's around utilization and duty cycle. And in the case of battery electrics, they're very lucky because the electric infrastructure we have is quite prolific. It's everywhere, and they have a really good head start. Battery technology has been scaling for years now, aided by deployments on the grid and many manufacturing scale up around the world. Remember that fuel cell vehicles, of course, with a different refueling profile, are very well suited for applications that there's simply not enough time to recharge between day to day. And that can occur with passenger vehicles, heavy duty vehicles, and certainly for long haul vehicles where payload and weight is an issue, another great application for hydrogen. I think that the ability for hydrogen to take off as a platform for mobility is dependent on cost. Because when you start looking at total cost of ownership, the cost of the fuel matters a lot. Here in California, we have more hydrogen fueling stations than I think any other state in the country. And at the pump, hydrogen, unfortunately, is still about $15 a kilogram. This is a problem. I've been talking to fleet operators of both stationary diesel equipment that can be converted to fuel cell equipment, trucks, long-haul trucks. Many of these applications are just not suitable for battery electrics. And the problem that holds them back, there is this challenge of availability of equipment for the fuel cell equipment, but the real problem that's holding them back, it isn't the capital cost of that equipment, it's really the cost of fuel. So this is where solutions around building the green hydrogen economy in targeted locations by combining demand for green hydrogen, combining mobility demand with other demands such as power generation or industrial applications and steel plants together can accelerate demand much faster than a mobility application could on its own, driving down the cost of the fuel and stimulating demand for faster conversion. The other thing I wanted to say and really echo the framework that Tomas had laid out around industrialization, but his point about the policy and the regulatory landscape that is so critically important for creating a business value proposition. And regulatory intervention is needed, and we need to start on it right away. I wouldn't wait until after the demonstrations, the industrial demonstrations. We need to go fast and start working on that right away, especially to enable progress in targeted locations so we can afford the infrastructure for low delivered cost. Is what we found. Again, if the name of the game is to get low delivered cost for mobility, and I think in the US, $3 a kilogram and below is the magic number where it becomes competitive with diesel. we need to start working on creating that value proposition, and it depends on the regulatory landscape. Thanks.
Thank you, Yanis. I think you have, or you are too lucky in California. You have more hydrogen filling stations than the whole European Union, excluding Germany. I guess you are really lucky on that. I would like to open the floor to all of you, Joanna, Telmo, Tomás. The question, I said fight, not fight, but I think that Yanis cannot see me here, what I'm doing. But what's about the fight in between these full electric battery vehicles and the fuel cell ones? Yanis talked us about hydrogen costs, regulations. What on you?
And it's not just batteries, yeah, that fight, as you call it, it's happening among other low carbon technologies. And I remember the moment when we were still setting up the European Directive for Alternative Fuels for Transport, and we were all invited to go and present to the European Parliament our technology. And I was lucky enough, I was selected to go and present the case for the hydrogen. So clearly, I believe, what on earth all these other people are going to talk about? They don't have a story, right? Because all this is not zero emissions. Who wants to stand, and charge in a car for 1 hour somewhere at the station? That's never gonna happen. So I believed I had all the facts, yeah? And at the time, we had done the case study. So we have done, in UK, for example, at the time, we were paying from taxpayers' money to the wind farms 800 million a year to stop, yeah, because the demand and supply didn't balance. So if you were not stopping and making hydrogen from all this curtailed wind, the hydrogen cost you mentioned would be -£1. So, we had the facts. Hydrogen must win. So that's how I rocked up in the parliament, delivered my story, and then everybody else delivered their story, and I was smacked. You know what, when they got their facts, their side, and presented it, I was like, wow, okay, they got the case too. And it was a very big eye-opening for me. And I think, as the life goes, it's good that there is diversity. If you look what makes it to the companies, when you have equality and diversity, you promote innovation. And in the industry is the same. The more you make a level play field for everyone, however painful it is for me, I would like all the funds to go to hydrogen, but actually it creates competition, and then therefore you promote innovation, and then it starts to become more interesting for everyone. And you were talking about sort of the case studies, and we talked about the cost. So, that's very, very important aspect. And you're looking which niche, where will it happen? So clearly the UK mobility and France mobility, it was started by car companies, by the big OEMs, the Toyotas, the Hyundais, who had their 20-30 years plan that hydrogen will happen. And, the government and actually the oil companies, the BP, the Shell, in those early days, they actually started to see beyond the horizon, and they were going, okay, I need to be in this new field just in case. And it was the car companies that set it all in moving. And we were doing all these nice case studies and going, okay, how many stations we need? And actually it was only California that then came up with that sort of command, if you're building a new station, it has to have a hydrogen in this radius. And that really started it. But the rest of the Europe didn't follow the same command, and therefore we didn't create that sort of network of safety where people actually start buying cars. And the analysis was showing that people don't actually buy a hydrogen car if they only have one station in their city, because it's too much of a risk. Yeah, you only have one station, it goes down, you go nowhere. There's no way, no matter how rich you are, and if you can afford the car because it's more expensive, that you're going to buy it, because you don't have that safety that if this station is broken, 10 miles down the road, there is another one. So you needed at least 3 stations within sort of 15 miles for the common consumer safety factor going, yes, I now believe hydrogen is here, I can refill safely, and I go. So that then started that whole momentum of how do we create the case study and how do we dot the stations around? Because if we just started dotting one, still nobody will buy the vehicles. and the stations will be sitting there empty. So then the hydrogen hub idea started to evolve. And this is where kind of the shift happened from passenger cars more towards the buses. Because it was that natural environment of, okay, there is always 20 buses in the depot, they always go the same route, so therefore it's amazing because we know now how to design either an electrolyzer, a basically local point of hydrogen, so you make as much as you consume, and because that station is designed to that size, the cost of the hydrogen is good because you don't waste so much on all the operations just sitting there doing nothing. So that sort of shifted the where you get. But you look, the fight between electric buses and electric hydrogen buses, it's still there, but it then depends again on the application. In London, there's plenty of electric buses and they are doing quite well because there's lots of congestions, therefore they don't do that many rounds a day. And by the end of the day, they are just fine and go and plug in the depot and good. Same electric buses were moved to Liverpool. For those of you who are not from there, it's a little bit far north. So there is a lot less congestion and it's a little bit hilly. So suddenly all these buses are going a little bit faster and, going a little bit more hills during the day and the batteries don't last. So same bus taking to a different location, all of a sudden, is no longer good on the battery, and you need to start hybridizing with fuel cells. So, and then I am saying hybridizing because it's not really fuel cell versus battery. Lots of the fuel cell applications would have also a battery included, so they really work very much hand in hand. And then clearly the idea of the fleet started to take off, and we started to talk about the multi-modes of transport. So now I think lots is happening in the UK where people are looking at valleys. And I think we discussed it last night. So suddenly it's become, yes, nice, we have a valley. We can have lots of hydrogen in one point. We don't have to transport it anywhere, which is always the issue. And we now can have lots of buses, lots of cars. We can have a train. But all of a sudden it's a massive engineering job because you need to design a train, you need to have a bus, and it needs to all happen at the same time. People need to collaborate, and it's no longer so easy to just go, hey, let's do a hub tomorrow. It needs to all come together. That's where the government interventions comes in. And I think it's no longer me, you, whatever. People will decide to go hydrogen if it makes sense for them. And we didn't mention, for example, in other hubs, airports. Yeah? It's a very natural hub because all the aircrafts, they just go from A to B, and there is so many airports around the world, and therefore it's a very natural hub. So, and we're looking at air transports, and the announcement, for example, Airbus made early in the air, hydrogen is very much on their agenda, be it 2030, but the wing is being developed in the UK as we speak. Ricardo is working on a program called Fresson, developing a bespoke fuel cell. So suddenly you start looking at the technology possibilities. And that program Fresson was actually interesting. It started as a battery, and they wanted to fly with this 9-seater aircraft. And halfway through the program, realized that actually, you know what? If I want to fly, I need to add more battery. But the battery adds more weight, or I can no longer take off. And it just becomes to the point where battery just cannot make it. And you need to put in a fuel cell, and very often it's not any fuel cell you can buy on the market. That's where you then need to start designing something bespoke for that market. But the aero and fuel cell, I think, goes really, really well together because you can achieve very interesting power densities. And then you start also talking about, okay, hydrogen, but what? Is it compressed 350? Compressed 700? Is it going to be liquid? Yeah. Another application which you can make nice cases, ports. Yeah. Again, lots of transports come. Suddenly the boats come in the game and the big ferries. And then you're going, where am I going to store this hydrogen? Is actually hydrogen as a gas going to be a good solution on a massive boat? Nonsense. Again, you need to look at the technology possibilities and where the limits are, and suddenly maybe you start looking at storing this at ammonia, maybe it's not even a PEM fuel cell, maybe it's a solid oxide fuel cell. So it's kind of a mixture of commercially driven technology-driven, all coming together with the right government support in the right place? I know, long answer, sorry. I told you I can talk about hydrogen all night.
Telmo, Tomás.
Well, I think so. It has pretty much go through all the possible uses and transportation. But I think in terms of transportation and of this, let's say, fight or the decision between fuel cells, we think a lot Europe is quite packed and we have all cities, everything is quite close together, and probably you can think of traveling from one city to another one in a battery electric vehicle. But when you exit the continent and you start going to places like the States, when you have long distances to travel, or even places with very low density like Canada, Australia, or probably parts of South America and all that, you realize that sometimes there is not such an infrastructure for electricity, and the infrastructure to dispense fuels, liquid fuels or gas fuels already exists, okay? And probably for those places, these fuel cells vehicles will find a place, even for applications that here in Europe they do not have, because we have a very nice electric grid and very easy way to charge them. Probably in other places in the world will have. I mean, that's pretty much. And of course, long haul, there are like ferries, ships, and all that kind of stuff. It's really difficult to store all the energy in batteries, and especially I think organic carriers will do the job there.
Well, yes, I think that the hydrogen revolution will not make a big difference if we look backwards to any other revolutions regarding energy. Nowadays, if you go to the energy sector, you have different alternatives that is launched in different locations according to the, as I mentioned, the infrastructure, the culture, the resources available, and so on. If you don't have renewable energy, for instance, then you have a big difficulty to deploy your renewable hydrogen. So I think it will happen more or less the same. If we're talking about energy transition, it's important to note that we are talking about a huge amount of money. I think the last figure I saw regarding the European Union was talking about 140 trillion of euros to make the energy transition up to 2050, which gives I don't think I can imagine what trillions mean. It's a kind of huge figure.
How many zeros are there?
Yeah, and the same if we're talking about Spain is 300 billions of euros to make the energy transition. So it's such a huge amount of money that the main driven after getting the goal, which is essential, we are all agree on that climate change is there and we need to tackle the CO2, is first the cost, and second the time to market, because it's also something important. Talking about batteries and hydrogen, and I think Yanis has explained very well. Batteries are already there, especially in Europe or let's say in OECD countries. You can deploy electrical recharging quite fast, and it's there. The level of decarbonization is depending of the decarbonization of the grid, which is also important because we have countries in Europe, for instance, that we can talk about if that is a real decarbonization or not. But there are issues regarding the batteries in the long term. And if the fleet grows a lot, I think there are some challenges about the availability of the materials for the batteries, the recycling of the batteries. There are some geopolitical issues with that, and I think all of us are aware of that. So probably batteries have an advantage to start. I'm not sure if they're going to run so fast as people think, because there are a lot of issues on that. Of course, there's a third item there, which is technology development, can bring some kind of breakthrough and change the game every time. And the second, and as I mentioned, so first of all, is the time. I think it's important that we need to decarbonize as soon as possible, and we need to use the technology first. And the second is the cost, and I think Yanis has explained very well the cost of the hydrogen. I think that it's important that even that I am the hydrogen director and I'm pushing the hydrogen in my company, if I find that there is another solution that is better or cheaper or faster, I will raise my hand and say, guys, let's stop doing this and let's move there. And I think that's important, that try not to be very pushy with the solution. We have to be very pushy with the target and very pushy to achieve the goals and look for the different pathways. Competition and innovation is always good. That's my experience. I've been working in technology for 12 years, and competition is always good. It pushes innovation so far. You start collaborating with other people, you make some kind of competition collaboration at the same time, and that's the better way to improve. So we need to take advantage on every single technology that decarbonizes. I believe that hydrogen will find its needs, I'm sure on that. For instance, for the industry application is clearly difficult to battle. And if we're talking about mobility, it will have some space for sure. And especially if we look at it in a holistic way. The first way the hydrogen is going to arrive to the transport sector is insert in a hydrogen carrier. And that will happen in the shorter term than the hydrogen itself, in more quantity at least. So hydrogen will be there, it will have its needs. If we're talking about, let's say, fuel cells, I think the potentiality is pretty good. And as I mentioned, especially if we're talking in the long term compared to batteries, I think it will have an opportunity even to move maybe to light duty. For heavy duty is clear, but I think even to light duty can have a space there in the long term, because the density or let's say the amount of mass that you have to transport and for create the energy is less, and the dependence of critical materials is less. So if you're talking about, when you start thinking about the amount of cars in Spain, in Europe, and then worldwide, it has a significant space to run. I think we will have very funny times in the coming years.
For sure. Thank you very much for your answers. I would like to add something on what Joanna told before about the fear of the driver in both technologies, both in battery electric cars and in fuel cells. We are analyzing right now at Aragon Hydrogen Foundation because we received a question from a fuel cell driver, from a Toyota Mirai driver that wants to go to the COP26 in Glasgow from Madrid. And obviously the fear is there in us, because we are not sure if the car is going beyond the Pyrenees. This is the crucial aspect right now, because the hydrogen refilling station at Madrid is at 700 bars, so it's okay. We have a hydrogen filling station at our facilities at 350, and we think it will not be enough to go beyond and across the Pyrenees. So we will see. We have the fear, but I'm pretty sure that the driver has more fear right now than us. At this point, we have arrived and go through the half of the time that we have. I would like to encourage the public here and also the public that is attending to the parallel session online to think about some questions that you may ask to our speakers here present today. But in the meantime, 10 more minutes of talk with you regarding the plans that the governments are promoting in your countries. We have here two representatives from Spain. We almost know what Spain is moving on, but I think that it will be very interesting to listen what the ladies have to say here. Janice from the USA and Joanna from the UK. Janice, please, what are the plans in your country to develop an economy based in hydrogen technologies?
Well, our new federal government is definitely making hydrogen a priority, clean hydrogen as well as green hydrogen. There's multiple legislation introduced to consider tax credits and tax incentives for green hydrogen. And in the infrastructure bill that is, sort of embroiled in the process now, shall I say, but it's that bill is very exciting. It has $8 billion for funding for 4 hubs, hydrogen hubs. And we really like the hub idea. I think that Joanna introduced a hub. It can be as small as one station, growing to as big as an airport, a port, a maritime port. The hub that we're working on spans multiple states and is centered around multi-sectoral demand aggregation, including mobility applications in the city of Los Angeles. And so to answer your question, we have a lot going on, starting with federal leadership, and also a lot happening at the state and regional level, multiple states, and down to the local level. Really, I think that the hydrogen economy will be enabled when we can aggregate a lot of demand, and I mean like millions of metric tons of hydrogen per year, green hydrogen, so we can afford the infrastructure for low-cost transport and storage. I think one of the challenges today and why hydrogen is so expensive at the pump here, a good rule of thumb is if it's $15 per kilogram at the pump, about a third is the production cost, a third is the station itself, and a third is just delivering it, which today it's primarily on a truck. If we were to deliver and had the infrastructure to deliver that same hydrogen by pipeline, we would be taking that $5 a kilogram cost down to something like 20 cents. And what's really exciting is when that infrastructure exists and it's prolific and say it parallels existing infrastructure, uses the right-of-ways of gas pipelines, you could create fueling stations and plug and tap into that infrastructure at every, at regular intervals along the way. I think the availability of low-cost visibility into mass quantities of low-cost green hydrogen in a targeted regional footprint will be the key enabler for more rapid adoption for mobility applications. And this is starting to happen now. The last thing I'll say is we've been watching what's happening in Europe on sort of these large projects that are being announced, and North America is catching up. So the largest project in North America is the conversion of a coal plant to a 100% green hydrogen turbine. The turbine is an 840 megawatt combined cycle gas turbine. On its first day of commissioning, which will be in the summer of 2025, it'll combust a blend of 30% green hydrogen by volume. And when it's operating at 100% green hydrogen, that one plant will require 277 million kilograms per year, which is a whole lot of hydrogen. And so that one project will be quite a head start in stimulating the supply chain. And then the next step, that plant's in central Utah. The largest off-taker is a municipal utility in Los Angeles. The next plan is to convert all the power plants in Los Angeles to green hydrogen. That will be a boon for fueling stations. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Shall I just keep going since you are a little bit off?
You are the moderator right now.
Okay, so very interesting, and it's interesting how you describe a little bit what's happening. And so in UK, we now had quite a lot of new policies, but before I go to sort of what has happened in the last 2 years on the political scene, I think it's worth just painting a little bit the picture of, you mentioned the sort of prices and being 1/3 of the supply, the price of the hydrogen being a supply. It's at the moment in UK, we are beyond the chicken and egg problem. Anytime somebody mentions it, I keep screaming, don't forget the cock, because there will be no chain if you don't have the cock and the chicken and egg, yeah? Because otherwise the chicken and egg will die. And I explain why I say that. So at the moment, we have lots of stations around UK. Yeah, you have the pump there, fine. We do have lots of applications. We have buses and you name it, we have it. What we don't have is the molecule of hydrogen coming to those stations. And for example, my company is very much at the southern end of UK. We're setting up a massive test facility, up to 400 kilowatts of hydrogen engine testing, another 400 kilowatt of fuel cell testing, and we're testing nothing because we can't get the hydrogen. Yeah, and the price we're getting, Yanis has mentioned, we're paying a lot more than that. And when we were grilling the supplier, they were like, just be glad we're even talking to you. Because your demand is big, so we still bother negotiating with you on the price. We have so many customers, so much demand, that half of them we just even don't bother to supply. So in the end, for some of our smaller programs, we had to tap through my network of friends who already had a set up account with the supplier, and we kind of became another one of their delivery points. And that's how we cheated the system, so we could get some hydrogen so we can actually fire our engines. So, we need the molecules in the right place. So that's the current situation, total monopoly of hydrogen, which is not even a green hydrogen. So, and clearly these organizations were around the table when the policies were being created, and that's probably partly why we are currently in the situation where we are. So, where is UK? So in 2020, there was something called 10-point plan being issued. Don't ask me what all the 10 points are. The most important thing for me is point 2, hydrogen. Good. So we saw that, so that was great, but it's like everything. The policy, it just talks around, great, we will do great things, we create the green jobs, we put lots of billions in it, but where is the reality? How is the mechanism? So that was sort of 2020. At the same time, there was a whole industry decarbonization plan being issued. That was sort of early 2021. And that just basically, again, stayed very generic, but sort of said, you know what, decarbonization is good, but let's do it that we don't push the dirty stuff abroad. Lovely. Okay, that's something will happen in the UK. And then that started pushing the issue of the so-called UK hydrogen strategy. And that was meant to come already last year. And we were waiting, and yes, next month, and the typical political scene. And I believe if it wasn't for the COP26 knocking on the door, we still wouldn't see the policy. And finally, the policy has been issued this summer. And one of the things which it said that you will have 5 gigawatt of renewable hydrogen available, or low carbon hydrogen, by 2030. And I go, where did I see that number before? So I went back through my notes and found out that the year earlier, the Scottish government issued a national hydrogen policy, and it said that by 2030 they will have 5 gigawatt of renewable energy. Go, hang on, isn't Scotland like part of the UK, and is it the same 5? So I said, okay, now I understand why there is so much industry upheave, where everybody keeps screaming, going, your plan is not ambitious enough, and there is this big fight now, like pushing the government that they are not ambitious enough. The second upheave, which the industry is shouting at the government now, is because the policy sets out a sort of what they call dual plan or dual roadmap. So it's for green hydrogen and for the blue hydrogen. So a hydrogen made from steam methane reforming with the carbon capture. And again, a massive industry going, oh, this is all dirty. And there was, I don't know whether some of you have read it, there was all this, that blue hydrogen actually creates more emission than the green hydrogen in its production path. By the way, Ricardo has looked at those statements and reanalyzed the assumptions, and we have disputed it. So some of the assumptions in those statements were not correct, and therefore, please, if you have seen those reports, don't take them as a gospel. Just, again, you need to filter a lot what's kind of the lobbying and promotion and what's the reality and facts and hardcore. So that's now where the UK strategy is. So it says it will be 5 gigawatt of low carbon hydrogen. It will be both green and blue. And now they still don't know how to do it. So there are 3 consultations out now. So there is a consultation on 240 million net zero transition fund. And, just to give you a little flavor, alongside with that, the government has issued a tender for a consultant or to run this program so they can assess all the evaluation. And just to give you a real shock, the government will pay over the 3 to 5 years around 7.5 million fixed up to 10 million just to this consultant or consortium of consultants to run 240 million fund, because they understand that it's a lot of public money and they actually don't have enough of the technical capacity to assess all the supplication and say, yes, they are correct, because there will be big money in play. So it's just to put it in perspective. Then there is a consultation on the methods of how to distribute the funds. And that's actually also quite interesting, because what they are trying to avoid is that they just shove the money all the time. And then happens what happened in China. I don't know whether you were aware, maybe it's now 2 years, when the China first embraced hydrogen, they had this sort of national policy and local policy, and all together you got more money than what actually it cost you to build a hydrogen fuel cell bus or whatever. And as soon as they done, I think, the 20,000 kilometers with the bus, they ticked the box, got the money. They took the fuel cell out, stuck it in a different bus, got another. And they were making massive profits just by circulating fuel cells and ticking the boxes. So, clearly the UK government has learned the lessons, and they're doing something called contract for difference. So you only get the money as long as you kind of not leveled with the existing technology. So, but how it's going to be measured, and those methods will clearly be different for different kind of production technologies. So that's also being out for consultations. So if there is anybody in the audience, the consultation closes 25th of October. So still you can make your opinion known. And as you know, UK needs new players. So if you think you can make hydrogen somehow, make sure your methods are being captured. And the third consultation is a standard for low carbon hydrogen, because clearly the hydrogen can be made from so many different sources in so many different ways. And it's became a very confusing, we call it the rainbow. Yeah, and you can see so many different rainbows, and now orange and yellow, and nobody understands it. So they are trying to put out a consultation in how to measure the emissions across the whole production of different hydrogen technologies. So that's the third one. Also closes 25th of October. So if somebody, again, wants to enter the UK market, I encourage them, please do submit your views into the strategy.
Thanks, Joanna. Where is Spain? Telmo, Thomas, we have seen that the green hydrogen plan that was launched almost 1 year ago is quite ambitious. We have already gone through several public consultations that are now taking place in the UK, and I think that we have a strong political commitment. We saw yesterday the Urkullu and the King inaugurating this event here. So where is Spain?
Well, as you explained very well, the political commitment is there, and it's quite high. I understand the choice of green in Spain because the conditions are pushing on that. I will not regret about the blue. It's a question of if you have the right to win on blue, and I think in the Northern Sea, it's very clear that there are facilities there that can bring this CO2 downgrade earlier, and it's not the same case of Spain. So out of that, I think that we need to move ahead, especially in the regulatory environment. We need to have a clear definition of what is needed to manage the amount of renewable energy that's going to be taken into account to produce green hydrogen. That is something coming from a delegate out from the European Union. We need that to be launched to understand how we can create these business cases and these value propositions. Is something very critical. Remember that essentially the renewable hydrogen is 75% of the cost of the renewable hydrogen. So we need to understand how the renewable power is going to be considered, because according to the regulation, then you can move significantly for the amount of renewable energy and energy storage that you need to install to produce this hydrogen. So I think that's one thing that we need from the European Union. And then talking about the Spanish government, we need to understand which are the rules to access to the funding of the projects. The ambition is there, but the time is running. Yeah. We're talking about 2030, it's not that far anymore. And we have even a goal for 2024. Now, 2024 for an industrial project is nothing. I need to start now to get the hydrogen in 2024. So we need to understand which are the rules of this new market in order to create our rolling position. So we have talked to the authorities on that. We need to encourage them to clarify the rules as soon as possible in order that we can start running the projects, because the ambition is very high and the time is running. And I have some kind of discomfortable timeline with that. I don't feel that we will be able to achieve the goals if it takes a lot of time on doing this.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, as you said, yesterday we had a lot of representatives here inaugurating this Congress, but away from that, we think, from our point of view and our experience, on one hand, during this, there is a support for the hydrogen strategy. We see that the ministry is still gripped to their roadmap and is following it, although it's taking time, as Thomas is saying. It's 2024 for big facilities is tomorrow, and if you have to develop new technology, it's going to take you 5, 6, 7 years, and adapt all the value chains is going to take time. But on the other hand, we are seeing that even though we are facing these difficulties, and we have, and the European Union is pushing with the important projects of common European interest, and there is this integrated projects for the green hydrogen value chains, we also see that, on the other hand, what we have been taking for granted is the fact of having renewable energy in place, okay, to feed those electrolyzers of those stations of hydrogen production. There are being auctions for renewable energy in Spain, and those things are happening. Okay, that I think on the 19th they're going to close a new 3,000 megawatt of renewable energy. Some of it is going to be on fast deployment. They're going to happen. There's expected another auction for renewable energy for biomass and solar thermal before the end of the year. We are following that plan. Let's say life is difficult. Electricity prices are soaring right now, even though PV is as expensive as it was last year, but prices are 10 times, 8 times, whatever. And in fact, an hour ago, we had a new historical record of electricity price in Spain. But even though we're facing these projects, I think that renewable energy is being put in place. It is an important thing to have in order to produce green hydrogen.
Mm-hmm. Some of you mentioned that we are running out of time in terms of arriving or reaching the goals in 2030 for hydrogen. We are also running out of time in this session. It only lasts 15 or 16 minutes. Right now, I will encourage you to give shorter answers, the speakers to give shorter answers to the questions from the audience. We have a couple from the public that is attending online. The first one is, what can developing countries learn from Europe in the use of hydrogen for mobility? Maybe Thomas, Repsol can say something on that.
To be honest, I would say at now, nothing, because we have not done anything up to now. Probably we need to run the market a little bit, and we can have some lessons on that. I think that the developing countries need to first understand if they can put some green hydrogen on the floor, especially I think Northern Africa, some South America countries can do that, and then understand if the mobility is the right application for them. And I think that we need some years ahead to get, let's say, findings that can be useful for them. That's my feeling.
I thought about you because I see some movement in South America, and Repsol has some presence on there.
Yes. We are studying how the business hydrogen is going to grow. As I mentioned, we're going to start in Spain, but after that we have to look to other areas. We'll start looking first of our neighborhoods, and then we can look for some other countries out there. But our view from now is that the industrial application will be the leverage of the business value chain at the really beginning. So after that, we can think about marginal uses for mobility, because the size and the consumption is significantly different. But you need to understand country by country, which is the facilities, which are the promotion, which are the capabilities. And I think we need a little bit more time to get some insightful answer on that.
COVID-19 is obviously present in some of the questions. So someone asked here that the first fuel cell vehicles were put in place in the international spotlight during the oil crisis in the 70s. What have we learned now about hydrogen mobility in the context of COVID-19 crisis? Who would like to answer here?
It's a tricky question. Nobody's taking it. Well, I think what we have learned is it's more like as we emerge, all the countries have suddenly realized, okay, we were able to stay home and not move. Now we're going back to move. And, that thing where we didn't move around, we didn't pollute. And suddenly everybody started to look out of the window and goes, look, I can actually see the hills because the air is cleaner. And I think in minds of many people, it kind of created that image, okay, we can do this, we can stop polluting. So it accelerated all the national plans, and I think it gave us that real vision because we could see how the world will be when we stop polluting it.
Yeah, thank you. Ignacio Rey asked also online, and we are about to open also the questions to the public here. He asks about the logistics, not in terms of the pure mobility that we have been talking here maybe, but about the logistics of the transport and the distribution of this hydrogen. Do you think it's important? What do you think about this hydrogen distribution? We have mentioned here that we can see, and I think it was you, Joanna, that is not very standardized right now. We have 350, we have 700 bars, we have liquefied, we have energy carriers. How do you see the tendency of the market?
Well, I will talk from our perspective because logistics is critical. Logistics is a kind of overhead of energy system. You have money to produce the energy and then money to deliver, and logistics is a kind of overhead in the middle, and it's very expensive. Creating logistics is very expensive. So I think that we need to take advantage of the existing facilities first of all. We made a calculation that if we take advantage of the existing logistics in Spain, we will reduce 70 billion the price of the energy transition in Spain. Okay, so we need to take advantage of this. For me, that is very clear. That means that some of the gas existing facilities need to be adapted to increase the amount of hydrogen, and therefore you need to create the right regulation to that happen and make it happen, because probably at the really beginning the amount of hydrogen will be quite small compared to the natural gas, and you need to create some regulation on that regarding guarantees of origin and all these kind of things. And then you have to think about which is the more efficient way of the hydrogen consumption regarding the total cost of the energy. And maybe some of the hydrogen carriers will rise up because they can use the existing facilities. If we're talking about methanol, we're talking about ammonia, we're talking about synthetic fuels, there are already facilities there. If you're talking about pure hydrogen, you can use some of the facilities can be adapted, but some will need to be created new. And that would add a significant cost. We're talking about, let's say, thousands of billions. So we need to figure out how to maximize the utilization of what is already existing, because it will be less cost and less time to market the solution.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's open the questions to the public here. I think we have 10 minutes, so it's enough time for 2 or 3 fast questions and answers to our speakers. So please raise your hand, raise your interest. Someone to break the ice.
We scared them.
There is still one question pending on the chat. So okay, yeah, we have the first volunteer. Please present yourself from where you come.
Well, my name is Pedro Oira from Petronor. First of all, thank you all for this panel. And at the very beginning, you spoke about the fuel cells and the battery electric vehicles. But I would like to ask you about the direct combustion hydrogen engine. I think that would be great if it will fly. We all know that it's really difficult, but as Tomas was just saying right now, it would be great if we would be able to take advantage of the existing facilities. So according to your knowledge, do you have any insight of something happening under the radar and anyone, I don't know, developing this technology out there?
Yep. If you don't mind, I take that because I'm very passionate about this. Thank you for the question, by the way. It's really an excellent question. So it's clearly the whole world is kind of blindly now going fuel cells because fuel cells are zero emission, 100% perfect. And you can do all that chain, make a green hydrogen, and everybody's happy. But then the reality kicks in. When you reach sort of the larger applications, the larger boats, the larger trucks, yes, sure, you can make them on hydrogen, but it will cost you a fortune for a very, very long time. And you look at the regulations, it says 2030, you have to cut by 30% your emissions. And the company is going, how am I going to do this? You know, the fuel cells, are they actually proven to the 30,000 hours? And yes, some suppliers claim they are. So, you know, as Ricardo, we actually see, you ask, under the radar, we have 40 clients on our list, which are not making many public speeches about it, which actually looking at converting existing engines into hydrogen. And, you know, yes, it can be done. You need to modify it a little bit. And there are actually some companies in public domain, you know, Cummins and Deutz, they're doing it. And in Europe, actually, the standard says that the hydrogen engine classifies as zero emission. In UK, there is no such thing yet. But a great question. You can go very far, very quickly, especially for the larger applications. So both technologies, I would love if they are still being considered. Thank you.
Any more questions from the audience here? If not, I will just move to a very technical one that is on the chat. Hydrogen is very flammable and often sorry. Hydrogen is very flammable, as you can see, and often difficult to store. What recommendations do experts have on how cities can safely store and use hydrogen for mobility? So, regarding this question,
Well, I will talk regarding our experience. I think that we handle hydrogen, and handling hydrogen is not an easy task. But to be honest, I think that there are some safety issues regarding the massive use from hydrogen from non-expert people manipulating it, and it's something that we will have to study very well when we want to move downwards in the value chain. Taking out into account, we handle hazardous products in our lives, even at home. Yes. So I think that it can be done. It's not easy. You have to be aware. You have to think about that very well. You need a lot of engineering on that and regarding safety. But it is possible. It will. But I think it's something that is a kind of elephant in the room. Nobody's talking about it a lot. But we will need to have a hard work on that. But I don't think that is something that stops the progress of a technology. It doesn't happen up to now, despite of you have a major accident or these kind of things that can make some kind of drawbacks. But if you are not at that point, it's a question of technology, engineering, and safety policies that have to be push ahead and simplify for the end user in order to make it easy to handle.
Thank you.
May I jump in here and add a comment? So, on this question of safety, one of the reasons I became so excited about green hydrogen some years ago when I started looking into it is I realized that this is an extremely mature industrial commodity that's produced, stored, piped, sold all over the world. I was surprised to learn that there's something like 20 miles of hydrogen pipeline, 100% hydrogen pipeline, already installed in downtown Los Angeles, and more than 1,600 miles in the Gulf Coast of the United States. Of course, it contains hydrogen that's made from fossil fuels, but we can make hydrogen from renewable resources, and the resulting molecule is identical to the molecule that's made from fossil fuels, just without the carbon. And the other exciting thing about green hydrogen is that, most industry analysts and NGOs agree that in the long term, the renewable pathways will be cheaper, even without incentives, cheaper than the pathways to make hydrogen from fossil fuels. That's very exciting, especially because between where we are today and then, there is this possibility of repurposing existing infrastructure, whether it's pipelines, electric infrastructure. You can move green electrons and make the hydrogen locally if you have a source of water. And there's a lot of infrastructure in the power sector that can be reused. I talked about this coal plant that's getting converted to a combined cycle gas turbine. It's a very big turbine, and it's a combustion application. And the final thing that I learned, and this is good news for everyone in the mobility industry, is every power plant, gas turbine, can already combust some blend of hydrogen and natural gas, anywhere, say, from 5 to 30%, with minor modifications. Increasing the hydrogen combustion to 100% in some of these thermal electric generators will require further modifications, primarily to control the burn, because hydrogen combusts differently than natural gas, burns hotter, and to control the NOx emissions. So you can absolutely combust it, and that I think that combustion of hydrogen, especially in power generation, is a key beachhead application that will scale the hydrogen, drive down cost, and make it more cost effective for mobility applications and lowering the overall total cost of ownership. So thank you.
I think that also we are here running out of time, so thank you for your answers. Thank you for your time. We will let you go to sleep right now. So thank you very much. I think that we can conclude here the parallel session on hydrogen mobility. Let's see if hydrogen mobility moves from the early adopters to the mass market in the coming years. So thank you very much for your attention, and I will ask for a warm applause to our speakers. Thank you.